As a child survivor of the Nazi reign of terror, I learned indelible lessons about the nature of evil. I know the consequences of being stigmatized and demonized as a spreader of disease. My perspective is informed by my experience, by the historical record, and by the empirical evidence. We were required, as Germans know, to wear a yellow Star of David to identify us, to segregate Jews. Exclusionary laws barred the family from normal life, from attending ordinary activities. Our property was impounded. We were forbidden to participate in all educational, religious, cultural gatherings. Travel was forbidden for Jews, so there was no escape. These painful memories from my childhood sensitized me to the threat posed by current restrictive government dictates. You know, in 1776, Benjamin Rush, a doctor and signer of the Declaration of Independence, foresaw the danger of medicine organizing as what he called an undercover dictatorship. Under the Nazi regime, moral norms were systematically obliterated. The medical profession and institutions were radically transformed. Academic science, the military, industry, and clinical medicine were tightly interwoven, as they are now. The Nazi system destroyed a social conscience in the name of public health. Violations against individuals and classes of human beings were institutionalized. Eugenics-driven public health policies replaced the physician's focus on the good of the individual. German medical profession and institutions were perverted. Coercive public health policies violated individual civil and human rights. Criminal methods were used to enforce policies. Nazi propaganda used fear of infectious epidemics to demonize Jews as spreaders of disease, as a menace to public health. This is a hallmark of anti-Semitism. Blame the Jewish people for existential threats. In the Middle Ages, Jews were blamed for the bubonic plague and the Black Plague. Fear and propaganda were the psychological weapons the Nazis used to impose a genocidal regime. And today, some are beginning to understand why the German people didn't rise up. Fear kept them from doing the right thing. Medical mandates today are a major step backward toward a fascist dictatorship and genocide. Government dictates medical interventions. These undermine our dignity as well as our freedom. First, it was vaccination mandates for children. Now it's for adults. The stark lesson, of the Holocaust is that whenever doctors join forces with government and deviate from their personal, professional, clinical commitment to do no harm to the individual, medicine can then be perverted from a healing, humanitarian profession to a murderous apparatus. You know, the reason that the Greeks made the students of medical schools, before they were allowed into medical school, to swear the Hippocratic Oath was because they knew that in medicine you gain knowledge about how you can actually kill, and they had to promise that they would do no harm. Otherwise, they weren't allowed in medical school. I think they were ahead of us in understanding human nature.
Absolutely, yeah.
What sets the Holocaust apart from all other mass genocides is the pivotal role played by the medical establishment, the entire medical establishment. Every step of the murderous process was endorsed by the academic and professional medical establishment. Medical doctors and prestigious medical societies and institutions lent the veneer of legitimacy to infanticide, mass murder of civilians. T4 was the first industrialized medical murder project in history. The first victims were disabled German infants and children under 3. They were identified by midwives who reported their existence to the state. The next victims were the mentally ill, followed by the elderly in nursing homes. The murderous operations were methodical and followed protocol very, very carefully. Questionnaires were sent out to all psychiatric institutions requiring detailed information about each patient. A committee of 54 psychiatrists made the final life and death decisions for each patient. Now, the objective of T4 was to eliminate the economic burden of those the regime and the doctors deemed worthless eaters. And it was also to empty beds to make room for wounded soldiers during the war. T4 also served as a testing ground for various lethal chemical and pharmaceuticals. The financial beneficiaries of the Nazi genocide were the corporate elite. Their record of collaboration with genocidal regimes is uninterrupted. Without the financial support of Wall Street bankers and collaboration by major US, German, and Swiss corporations that provided the chemical, the industrial, and the technological material, Hitler could not have carried out this unprecedented industrialized murderous operations. Among the companies that profiteered from the Holocaust, Standard Oil and Chase Manhattan, both owned by Rockefellers, IBM, Kodak, Ford, Coca-Cola, Nestle, BMW, and of course IG Farben and Bayer, as well as Escher Wyss. IG Farben was the largest World War II profiteer. Using Auschwitz patients as slave laborers, doctors actually sent those whom they deemed able to be slave laborers to the IG Farben factories and mines. They also had their own camp. They also conducted experiments. IBM technology facilitated the rapid implementation of the Holocaust. Census data was contained in IBM computer punch cards. The Jews of Europe were quickly identified, rounded up, segregated, deported, tracked, imprisoned, tattooed, enslaved, and exterminated. COVID-19 pandemic has exposed eugenics-driven public health policies in Western Europe and the United States. This is a chilling replay of T4. Government directives to hospitals and nursing homes essentially condemned the elderly to death. In Europe and the United States, hospitals were ordered not to provide medical treatment, including oxygen, to elderly people in nursing homes. Several US governors sent infected elderly people to nursing homes, knowing that they lacked essential safeguards to prevent the spread of the virus. Before he issued the executive order that sent 15,000, more than 15,000 human beings to death, Governor Cuomo of New York State predicted that the virus would be like fire through dry grass in nursing homes. The corporate media Academy of Science awarded Governor Cuomo an Emmy for his TV performances that were billed as, what were they billed as? There are always euphemisms, but the point was he was giving the happenings of how the virus was progressing and what was being done. And the implication was that the White House wasn't doing it, so he was doing it for them.
I saw
These
that.
were briefings. That was the term that was used. Yeah. Of course, we have since found out, since the Attorney General report, that it was all a lie, and that he concealed the number of deaths. So he knew when people conceal a crime, they know it's a crime.
Yeah.
In 2006, during the avian flu epidemic, H5N1, a panel of public health officials advised the Bush administration to institute quarantines and closures and measured lockdowns. Their recommendations to consider these lockdowns were completely rejected by Dr. Donald Henderson, who was an acclaimed real eradicator of, among other things, smallpox. And he wrote a report. He was the primary author. There were 3 of them. And the report was in opposition to what he called unscientific measure. And this is what he said, I quote, "Experience has shown that communities faced with epidemics or other adverse events respond best with the least anxiety when the normal social functioning of the community is least disrupted. Strong political and public health leadership to provide reassurance and to ensure that needed medical care services are provided are critical elements. If either is seen to be less than optimal, a manageable epidemic could move toward catastrophe. Today, debate is forbidden. A doctor is not allowed to say that. The virus is being exploited to maintain a state of fear. Lockdowns have, in this time around, proved to be very effective tool for social control, but they failed to change the course of the virus. People are being conditioned to submit passively to government dictates. Children who are deprived of an education are being conditioned to distrust people. Mandatory masks are an insidious psychological weapon. They demean our dignity as free human beings. They do not work in this or any epidemic, and they are the symbolic equivalent of the yellow star. Study after study has found that lockdowns destroyed millions of lives and livelihoods, throwing millions of people into poverty. Even the Wall Street Journal has conceded that lockdowns were not worth the pain. However, for global oligarchs, the COVID pandemic has been a financial bonanza. American billionaires increased their vast personal wealth by $2.2 trillion just in 2020. So I guess we really can't overlook the strong financial incentive for lockdowns that destroy competition. All the local industries in most cities certainly have gone bankrupt. We're supposed to only buy from the large Amazons.
Yeah.
Doctors and scientists who express views that challenge official dictates are treated as heretics. They are threatened with loss of livelihood, and I'm sure you know some of them.
Oh, yeah.
Anyone who questions the safety of vaccines that have been rushed through Operation Warp Speed is muzzled and vilified by the media. Now, these COVID-19 vaccine contracts under Operation Warp Speed are totally confidential. They've even used a middle contractor who does things for the military so that those contracts can't be acquired under FOIA, Freedom of Information Act. They're not in government custody. Why? Why the secretiveness? Why has the CEO of Pfizer really tried to blackmail Argentina and Brazil? Others can examine what the financial reasoning for wanting such absolute control and assurance that they could not be sued. I mean, going to the extent of requiring them to give their military bases, their banks, and to put to get insurance in other countries. I mean, all this collateral. Why? What does he know is in the data that we don't know? If there's nothing to hide, why are they so anxious? No matter that governments have given them immunity, they already have immunity. It's not enough. Bill Gates stated in 2020 that the final solution to the pandemic will be a vaccine. You can decide what that means. Of course, he's referring to, and he knows he's old enough. But in other words, this is a kind of final solution.
Yeah.
To ensure compliance with COVID vaccines, governments have instituted unprecedented aggressive measures. This is primarily to ensure a vigorous cash flow. They're already talking about the vaccines being required every year.
Yeah.
That's, again, the Pfizer CEO, why not? They haven't yet even cashed in. I mean, the vaccination only began in the middle of December. What will their profits look like at the end of 2021?
Why do you think this is happening? Why are they pushing for this? What is the ultimate goal? What are they after?
Read The Great Reset.
Yeah, okay.
Klaus Schwab. That is a must. Now, it's laid out.
Yeah.
It's laid out, and it's essentially, it's to finish the job, only now it's global.
Yeah.
It's to go beyond Hitler. This is global.
Yeah.
It's about population reduction. That's always been the oligarchs' goal since John D. Rockefeller.
Mm-hmm.
And power, control. The technology today is far superior to IBM's punch cards.
Yeah.
What they are doing with this virus is to institute absolutely unprecedented, oppressive and repressive elements that imprison us in our homes. We're being tracked, surveyed. You know that green passports are now being instituted to have an apartheid two-class society. Mm-hmm. One class privileged, the other reviled and discriminated against. Sound familiar?
Absolutely.
Will ghettos, detention camps follow?
Yeah.
And how will people be killed? The Nazis used tattoos to identify and track Jews, well, so that they don't escape, right? Well, now we've got even invasive tracking surveillance technology already done. It's been developed thanks to Bill Gates. He financed these. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, this Great Reset is the master plan. Mm-hmm. Just as Hitler had a master plan, the Great Reset or the New World Order or the Fourth Industrial Revolution, this is a plan, and it's out in the open, and it's been, he published it. COVID, as he indicated himself, Klaus Schwab, is a wonderful opportunity to reset. Did any of us give informed consent to a reset of the world?
No way.
Well, shouldn't we? Shouldn't we be asked?
Yeah.
But this is just it. This has gone so far. Dr. Yudun talked before, I heard just the last 10 minutes, about how the agencies, the government agencies are giving a pass under the radar, and what's all that about? Yes, they've already the oligarchs already own governments. I don't believe that the way this COVID virus, it's not the virus that's the problem. It's the eugenics that's the problem. Yeah. It's never gone away. And that class, the elites, truly believe that they are Übermenschen and we are all Untermenschen. Yeah. That is what is driving this. So, money, of course, but power. Power is, it's like a drug, I think. There are people who are absolutely evil. They do not recognize the human species as being one. Once you start having these two-class systems, you will not prevent a global Holocaust. Mm-hmm. Okay. And they can do it remotely. Click, click.
If we let them.
If we let them. Now, I do want, in case you have not heard about this is terribly important, because a new and documented investigative report just came out in February. Schwab Family Values. You must read that. Father and son each collaborated with genocidal regimes, and this includes atomic, includes the Nazis, one generation, a continuum by the son, including dealing with the South African apartheid regime. You must read it, and you must interview him and get the documents. He documented, I've been looking for this, and nothing, I couldn't find anything on the website. It was all wiped out. Nothing on the website tells you anything about Klaus Schwab before 1970. The man was born in 1938. Yeah. And then when he appeared, suddenly he had, 20 doctorates and, and Harvard and it was just, this is a continuum. He provides the intellectual reasoning, and really it's a protocol how they're going to work. They don't just want to control us the way they are now, telling us how far distance we may stay from one another and be masked and all that. They also want to control our mind, our thinking. They want to know what we're thinking. And they already evidently have technology has gone way, way, way beyond its scope that it should, just as medicine has. Just as government has. Government should not be interfering in our personal lives, in our medical choices. What is that? Where did that come from? It started with the Nazis. That's really, why is it? My hope, while I never thought that I would be alive to be again afraid of the same elements. I'm afraid from the same people.
Yeah.
I think that as a Jew who was persecuted under that regime, I believe that this generation must lead this fight.
You do too.
We are connected. We were the victims. Your ancestors, right, were the perpetrators. We now must work together because each one of us, and there is, I'm sure, there's a memory going on in Germany, among Germans. We've got to plug into that and say, this time around, we won't let them get away with it. Because it's worse.
It is worse.
It's worse.
We won't let him get away with this. We spoke with Naomi Wolf a week ago, and she alerted us to what it's a digital passport, this green passport, what it can do. And it turns us into
everything, whatever you want.
Everything.
The banking, there are visionaries. There are people, the books that have been written, though. And those things, they grasp things.
Yeah.
Artists grasp things before the rest of us do. Mm-hmm. And the tragedy really was that, there were people, there was for example, a leader, I'll be talking about this to people in Israel because that's another target I have to deal with, who warned the European Jews in Eastern Europe, get out, leave. Mm-hmm. The place is going to burn down. Get out, leave. And of course, most didn't because, conspiracy theorists, they didn't call it that then, but it was sort of, what is he talking about?
Yes.
We're perfectly, we're all right. Nothing's going to happen to us. Luckily, my husband's father took him seriously, left Lithuania and went to Israel, and then brought the wife and the baby, and they were saved, and the others weren't.
Mm-hmm. It's probably not a coincidence that we have been speaking with and interviewing a number of people who are Jewish or Israeli, and that there's a really close cooperation that has come from this, and it continues. And I think you're absolutely right. It's us. We have to work together in order to stop this. But the other day I spoke with one of the lawyers who we have set up an international legal cooperation. It works really, really well. Including the Australians, because the Australians, the Canadians, the Americans, because we need that legal system, because it's the only one that has this powerful tool of class actions and this very powerful tool of pretrial discovery, which is the best law of evidence that anybody has ever had. And our friend Michael Swinwood, he's a Canadian lawyer who's been working with Indigenous people for 2 or 3 decades now, and he says he agrees with you, and we're going to file another international class action, this time for children only. Okay. And he says, of course he realizes that the precursor to this is what happened in the Third Reich, but he says it goes beyond that, because he started out representing indigenous people because they have always been the target of genocidal fantasies. And he says, and I think you agree with this, it used to be only the Indians, now we're all Indians. And that's probably what we are. That's why this is global, and that's why we have to join forces and collaborate in order to stop this.
You know, one of the dangers right now is that just as it was in the 30s, politically, the factions fighting each other, that's all set up. That's all set up. You know, Black Lives Matter, except in public health, where it's institutionalized racism.
Yeah.
So those are to divert attention from what they're really doing.
Mm.
One of the things that I hope that you'll do with some of your class action lawsuits is use the Nuremberg Code.
Absolutely.
Use that Nuremberg Code. I mean, again, you and I have a good reason to rely on that. And, you know, it's been cited. I know I was involved in 2 cases in the United States where judges, you know, cited it and absolutely used it. And nobody's ever challenged it. The beauty of the Nuremberg Code, which is why all the ones on the other side, really, particularly the officials, the public health, they hate it. They hate the Nuremberg. They even, you know, the Helsinki is a little bit of a watering down as well, because the Nuremberg Code can't be changed. Mm-hmm. It's like the 10 Commandments.
Yeah, it is. It is.
You know, it was that legal decision was not challenged. The Nuremberg Code stands, and they don't know what to do with it. You see, that's the problem. Helsinki, as you know, it changes every few years, depending on what's okay, what's not okay. No. The Nuremberg says you're a subject, right? Not a participant. And these are experiments, not studies. Mm-hmm. The language is terribly, terribly important. Everything in public health is done in euphemisms. Mm-hmm. Never straightforward. When they want to do a pesticide experiment on children, they call it cheers. When they experimented on premature infants, where one were given a lot of oxygen, the other very little, and some 23 babies died who wouldn't have if they would have been in regular care. They call it support. And, you know, the women about to give birth thought support. Oh, that means they're going to support me in this difficult time. You know, it's a premature baby, I'm afraid. That's how they hooked them.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And, of course, in these kind of experiments, it's Blacks and Hispanics.
Yeah. That is, I spoke with, of course, with Michael Swinwood, who alerted me to the fact that even close to 100 years ago, the Indians, the Canadian Indians, probably the American Indians as well, were used for all kinds of medical experiments. And then I spoke with an old Australian Aborigine. He supports a group of lawyers who are fighting this in Australia. And he says this is in the 1940s, when he was a child, his mother was smart enough to realize and to understand the danger of what was going on, because they were vaccinating people back then. They were vaccinating Aborigines, using them as guinea pigs. And he said, my mother was smart enough. She took us, the children, and we moved from one place to another whenever they came closer. And that's how they survived, and everybody else died or got seriously ill. From the very start, when I first realized what was going on, I thought this is the worst ever series of crimes against humanity ever committed, and we're going to have to look back, and we're going to have to make use of the Nuremberg Code, because that is the most important result of the Nuremberg trials. Yeah, you know, of course, that there is a couple, an Israeli couple who I am in touch with, who filed a complaint with the international, yeah, good people. I'm going to have to talk to them again. But as you can see, it does seem to be working. But no one can do it by themselves. It has to be all of us joining forces and fighting this together.
Oh, I agree. It's very important not to be splintered.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But it's all written out. You see, you can use the plan, the master plan,
Mm-hmm.
that this is where they're going. And this is not just this one person, Klaus Schwab. He leads it and he initiated it.
Mm-hmm.
But this is a global cabal, yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's probably no more than, say, 3,000 people who are at the very top of this. Unfortunately, they're the oligarchs you're talking about, but there's also members of the churches and
everyone has been given grants or whatever.
Yeah.
Everybody's been bribed, so everybody's on board.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And of course the media, in that sense, look, they've been planning this for a long time.
Yeah.
One of the things, for example, which was, it was something nobody else looked at it. There was somebody who wrote, Bill Gates was the only one through the Gates Foundation, nice tax exempt, all this foundation. Yeah. They're very much involved. He was one who started very early to fund reporters, journalist schools. So in other words, you already train them. By the time they go for their jobs at CNN or CBS or whatever, they're already indoctrinated.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a major problem. We spoke about this early today when our chief legal advisor, Professor Martin Schwab, not related, when he told us, alerted our attention once again to this fact. It's the media. It's the mainstream media. We call them the old media as opposed to the independent media. It's the media through which all this propaganda is working, and they've been paying them off for a long time, for probably at least a decade, if not longer.
Very long. And look, and the internet is the tech people.
Yeah.
And that's been totally. How did they come about in the first place? Mm-hmm. Most of the technology was developed by U.S. military.
Yeah. They invested in Amazon. They invested in Google, etc. Yeah.
That's right. Mm-hmm. And I would love, here's something. I would love to know what deal was made in 1995 between the U.S. Justice Department and Bill Gates. Mm-hmm. At that time, he was absolutely going to lose everything. Mm-hmm. They found the goods, in other words. And then suddenly he became a philanthropist.
Yeah.
That was how it happened. So the question is, what changed? What got the Justice Department off his back?
There must have been a deal. It's very, very obvious.
Yes, exactly. Mm-hmm. You see, these are a lot of these things. If one opens one's eyes and looks at things, then you start to understand.
Yeah.
But the trouble is, this is a little bit, again, I think it was in preparation, which is most young people fell in love with the technology. Mm-hmm. It's addictive. The iPhone is absolutely addictive. You walk along the street, people aren't even looking at the lights, they're looking constantly. They wake up and you see, now it's almost like a child with a teddy bear. Can a child imagine that teddy bear, which loves, is going to really do something against them? They can't believe the tracking that's been used for.
Yeah.
The accumulation of all their personal secret, relationships and whatever. They can't connect that. They think that we're nuts. Mm-hmm. Can I just quote one thing from Klaus Schwab so we know that, this is his own words. The pandemic represents a rare, narrow window of opportunity to reflect, reimagine, and reset our world. nothing will ever return to the broken sense of normalcy that prevailed prior to the crisis, because the coronavirus problems marks a fundamental inflection point in our global trajectory. What the fourth industrial revolution will lead to is a fusion of our physical, digital, and biological identity. This is transhumanism, in other words. But they're serious. I know when I first heard even about the concept of transhumanism, I said, oh, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
No, that was some years ago. And now there it is.
Yeah.
This is what they're planning.
Yeah.
And they've got a lot of the technology to do it.
I know. We see this danger. I do think these people are stark raving mad.
But look, so did everyone outside think Hitler was stark raving mad. It's exactly the same thing.
Yeah, we are taking this seriously. Absolutely. Okay, Vera, this is, I'm not going to be able to sleep tonight, but it's important to know these things. It's important. This has always been my firm conviction. We have to know what's going on. If we don't know what's going on, we're not going to make the right choices. That's why I'm extremely grateful for you being here. We will stay in touch, and we will stop this.
That is what they've so far succeeded, is that people prefer to be looked the other way. Mm-hmm. And they don't realize that their entire life is, they think as if they've got people convinced that by keeping, quote, it's physical distance we're talking about, and masking, that they're doing the civic thing. They're being good citizens.
Yeah. Vera, thank you very, very much. We will be in touch. Hopefully we're going to be moving in the right direction from here on, and we will be able to talk to you again under maybe a lot better circumstances. But up until then, we'll just keep cooperating. So. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. You get your champagne, I'll get mine.
Okay, great. Excellent. Well, thank you very, very much. This was shocking, but very helpful. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.